Welcome to the training overview of the Housing Finance Corporation. In this video, we'll provide an overview of the Housing Finance Corporation, or HFC, its structure and operations, and how we can utilize this tool to spur the supply of affordable housing. We'll cover what the HFC is and how it's created, why it's used, how projects are approved and funded, and what these programs have accomplished for our community. We'll also cover how corporation staff, city staff, and city council work together to safeguard outcomes. Let's start with the big picture. Dallas faces a serious housing supply challenge. The Office of Housing and Community Empowerment deploys several tools and programs to build, acquire, and redevelop housing, as well as tools to assist with rehousing. A Housing Finance Corporation, or HFC, is a nonprofit public entity created by the city. The City of Dallas authorized the creation of the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation through an adopted resolution approved by the Dallas City Council. However, it acts independent of the city. HFCs can be used to issue bonds for development. These bonds are typically paired with 4% low-income housing tax credits to finance the development of affordable housing. HFCs can be used to develop mixed-income housing with a strong focus on units for households at or below 60% of the area median income, to rehabilitate existing properties, including those that are existing low-income housing tax credit properties, and to issue bonds to finance single-family homeownership. The Dallas Housing Finance Corporation has a portfolio that fits all of these activities and includes rehabilitation and new construction projects. As recently as 2025, the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation has issued mortgage revenue bonds for single-family mortgage loans. The conversation for this video will focus primarily on mixed-income housing development. Now, you may be asking yourself, why this tool? The market doesn't always produce affordable housing on its own. Let's take a look at this chart. You see, it costs the same amount to build and operate affordable and market rate housing. In a market rate property, the cost to build and operate can be balanced out by adjusting rent prices. For example, if operational costs go up, rent prices can go up to keep up with operational cost. On the other hand, in affordable housing developments, revenue available to operate affordable properties are already reduced due to lower rent prices. Additionally, rents are usually capped, so there's a gap between what it costs to build the development and what the developer or operator is making to keep the development operational. Tax exemptions and other subsidies make affordable housing possible by covering the rent shortfall. Using an HFC can reduce operating costs because of tax exemptions, which helps make the project more feasible by closing the gap. Housing Finance Corporation properties are funded in the same way most affordable housing projects are, and typically use what's referred to as a more traditional affordable housing funding stack. While the funding behind them can be complicated, these projects usually rely on multiple sources that are specifically meant to support affordable housing, such as public subsidies and tax credits. Many projects in the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation portfolio use bonds issued by the corporation, which are commonly paired with 4% low-income housing tax credits. These projects may also receive additional funding from the City of Dallas, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and other federal, state, or local programs. Because these projects use several affordable housing funding sources that offer more developer-friendly terms or deeper subsidies, they are often able to serve households with lower incomes. Many Dallas HFC properties are affordable to families earning 60% or less of the area median income, and some developments are entirely affordable, with no market rate units at all. In some cases, homes are available to households earning 30 to 50% of the area median income, which is considered deeply affordable housing. It's important to understand that when multiple public funding sources are used, The project must follow the strictest rules among them. Affordability requirements are in place for a set period, typically 30 years, and are regularly monitored to ensure the housing remains affordable over time. Remember, this tool is primarily operated independently of the city. Let's see what the general manager of the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation, who oversees the day-to-day, has to say.
The mission of the HFC is to provide safe, sanitary, and quality affordable housing to the residents of Dallas, but it does it at a much deeper affordability level and a much higher rate. So all of the HFC projects are nearly 100% affordable. And that means almost all of the units on site are restricted at a lower income level. And so this is possible through the different financing mechanisms that are used to fund these projects. Those funding mechanisms are namely tax exemptions for one, but you also have tax credits as well as tax exempt bonds. And so these things combined allow you to get a much deeper affordability level on these properties while still being able to provide a very high quality piece of real estate for residents to enjoy and for them to have their families at. The HFC is definitely needed because the funding allows you to get a much deeper level of affordability. You just get more for your money in terms of affordability. Now, it limits access to certain areas because the timelines are much longer. And so this is one tool in the toolbox that contributes to the larger goal of affordable housing in the entire city. And so there are certain things that the HFC has capability to do that PFCs can't do or that housing authorities can't do. And so it's a very efficient and a very well-tested method of providing affordable housing to communities that have not as much income to offer for rent. It makes it an effective method because banks are used to how these are financed. There are several layers of government compliance that are tied to all of these deeper funding subsidies. And so it makes it a very safe and a very efficient investment from the government's point of view to get to a much deeper affordability level. For the financing of an HFC project, it can be very complicated, and that's where most of the confusion from the layperson comes in. When we start talking about bonds, these are bonds that are different from the normal GO bonds that the city council would consider to fund public works and things like that. These are tax exempt bonds that come from a federal pool that are delegated to the state, and so they act kind of as a mortgage loan in order to build or to buy the property and to enact renovations. And so that's just one piece of the funding, but it's required to, you have to fund each LIHTC project that the HFC comes into partnership with at least 50% of tax exempt bonds. And so the other funding sources that you get are these tax credits, which also come from the state and federal government. And then you also have your regular equity with the development partners that are investing in this project. And then you have the tax exemptions on top of that, if you choose to do that. Now, not every LIHTC project is tax exempt, but we've seen in recent years as construction costs go up and as operating costs go up, that extra subsidy is needed in order to make these work financially and to break even. The first step is an application to the corporation. That will go before the board in a public meeting, and they will vote on whether or not to preliminarily approve it. And then after the board, say it gets approved at that level, you will take it to city council. The city council will get the option to weigh in on whether or not they really think this is good for the community as well. So there's also another level of public scrutiny that goes on there. There's public comment allowed. All of the documentation is available if requested by any residents. And so I think it's a really transparent process. It's really one that tries to be very accountable to the dollars that are being invested in it. And so even after the city council approval, if you do get lucky enough to get that, you also have to go back to the board one more time to get final approval. And so if city council is looking at each of these projects, I want them to focus on the community surrounding these. Is there investment surrounding these new projects? Is the community surrounding them depressed? One of the most unique projects that we've done has been the Palladium Redbird project, as well as the Palladium Buckner Station project. Now, these have been sites that were depressed, that were experiencing economic downturns, but we were able to go in and partner with a private developer who was willing to do the work in the background and get it financed to uplift the community. And so our Redbird project, I think it's 300 units and almost all of it's affordable. And it went in and transformed the blighted area surrounding an old underused mall. And now it provided an extra base where people can start their homes, start their families, and uplift that community surrounding that mall. And we're hopeful as the years go by that you will see the effects surrounding just that site. We want to see it as a catalyst to that community. As you walk out of most of our projects, again, you'll see how high quality they are. So the good thing about the state regulation is that you have to maintain minimum standards, or else the state will claw back all the subsidies that they gave you. And the developers, they're bottom line driven. And so if there is a chance that they're going to have money clawed back from them, they want to do everything they can to avoid that. And so if they come out of compliance with these state programs, they'll be subject to that. And so they're very, very incentivized to maintain a very high quality property. That's both in quality of materials, but also with crime, with services, with all of these different things that they need to be compliant with in order to remain in good standing with the state.
As discussed, each property in the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation portfolio has to go through a layered approval process, and each party, the corporation staff, and city council, play a unique and important role. Here's a little visual, and as you can see, corporation staff manage applications, developer communication, and project selection. They also provide quarterly and annual reports to the city on portfolio performance and financial standing of the corporation. City housing staff review projects for alignment with housing goals and prepare items for city council. They also ensure long-term affordability compliance. City council plays a critical role in ensuring transparency and alignment with housing priorities. City council appoints board members for the corporation and sets policy direction. They also review and vote on projects requiring council approval. City council also ensures projects meet program standards, consider the public benefit analysis, and engage communities as needed. Since its inception in 1984, the Dallas Housing Finance Corporation portfolio has grown to 48 properties, including 28 that are in operation and 14 that are under construction. The total portfolio is valued at over $1.5 billion, provides 9,616 units, with just over 9,200 of those units being affordable in the city of Dallas. Today we covered what the HFC is, why it's used, how projects are approved and monitored, and what these programs have accomplished. To learn more or to get involved, visit our website or attend an upcoming board meeting held on the second Tuesday of every month. Thank you for watching.